Okay, welcome to the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, everyone. Thanks for coming along. I'll read the webcasting introduction and then we'll move on to introductions. This meeting will be webcast, be filmed live and recorded and uploaded to the internet, and so capable of repeated viewing. So by participating, you're consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and recordings. If anyone doesn't wish to have their image captured on Teams, they should ensure their video setting is turned off. We don't have any public speakers, and if members can turn their microphones on before speaking and off afterwards, that would be great. Okay, well, my name is John Whitehouse. I'm the chair of the meeting. Very pleased to welcome Heather Neal to her first meeting as our independent member. It's very important we've got independent members of the Audit Committee, and it's great to be up to full strength again. And yeah, I hope you find it interesting and look forward to your contributions. Also welcome Hannah to, I think, your first Audit Committee meeting, one of our internal audit team, and Councillor Morris, who's not a member of the committee but is a councillor who takes an interest in these things. So welcome to you as well. And I think you've met everyone else. Okay, are there any apologies for absence, please?
I've received 2 apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Owen and from Councillor Sunga.
Okay, and are there any declarations of interest? Nope. In which case we can move on to the minutes of the next meeting. Are people, or those of us who are there, happy that they're a correct record? Yep. Okay, so we'll agree those as correct. There's a couple of matters arising just at the end of the minutes. We'll pick up, I think, the issue about community cohesion in the risk item later on in the agenda. And there's an item about asking for an update on the climate risks. Does anyone want to sort of say anything about that? We'll pick that up if needed in the work plan or in feedback when we get to the risk item. Which takes on to the work programme on page 7.
So this is our usual work programme that we have for the Audit and Governance Committee. We were going to have the anti-fraud and corruption strategy and the whistleblowing policy coming to this meeting, but they'll be coming to the February meeting. And if there's any additional reports or items that you want to add to the work plan, just need to ask.
Okay, and I think we're also expecting the external auditors to come in at the beginning of next year. Do you want to update us on that, Mr. Sparks?
So I've spoken to the external auditors and they've got an update, so if you're happy I'll just go through that. Yeah. So this is on the audit and some of the other work that are undertaken at the moment. So as reported at last committee, the field work for the audit started in October. That is continuing. There was a 2-week pause really due to capacity issues within the team and trying to get the audit work turned around, which is really a symptom of being a district council and that backlog and a lot more samples and that being required. So they're now back doing their field work, and their intention is to complete that before Christmas and then do their review process in January. So still with a hope for a month in hand before the statutory backstop date in February. The focus remains on a number of areas which they're working through at the moment. They're going to share their VFM commentary in their draft Auditor's Annual Report with myself, and obviously I'll forward that to yourself, Chair of the Committee. That's within that statutory date for that, which is the end of this month, so imminently. Obviously what will happen when that is completed and they come back in the new year, the final version of that will be brought to the whole committee to review with their recommendations and their findings. At this stage, they have identified some significant risks relating to Qualis, financial stability, governance and effectiveness, but having done their work, there are no significant weaknesses that have been found to date in relation to that, although they did flag that risk up, but the work hasn't taken anything up. So I'm going to cough again, excuse me, sorry. That's difficult, isn't it? The other thing that I did allude to last time is there's been some change in some of the audit regulations, and they have confirmed they're not able to rely on the audit work of the auditors of Qualis and TVS. That's because the audit and the accounts been done by the same external firm, so they're ready to change, so they're going to repeat some of that work on external companies that will then feed into our group accounts. So again, they've just confirmed what they sort of mentioned last time around. So capacity issues do continue, and what will happen is on an ongoing basis we're talking to the auditors about what level of work completed this year and what might be deferred to next year, and that ties in with this named opinion that we're likely to get for this year, next year, before we get that full audit opinion, whilst they build up their picture of the historic balances brought forward, whilst the audits haven't been happening in previous years. And that's their update, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for that. So just briefly, when we're talking about capacity issues, we're talking about capacity issues within the council, not capacity issues within the auditors team.
I think we've been, in a way, pleasantly surprised. There's been so many auditors, which has been part of the issue, really, yes.
Thanks. So are we expecting to need to slot in another meeting to handle the external auditors, or will they come to February's meeting?
We're hoping that as soon as the accounts are ready, that we'd arrange through yourself an additional meeting, but hopefully by Christmas we'll know where that sits and we can put a date in the diary. Otherwise, we've got the date in the diary for February, which we'll remember we put in because it's just before that backstop date to make sure we're compliant with the regulations.
Okay, so watch your inboxes for a potential extra meeting. Okay, so are there any other questions on what we've just heard, or comments on the work plan, or suggestions for changes or additions to the work plan? No, happy with that? Okay, thanks very much. So we can move on to the Treasury Management Report next, isn't it?
So this report is the quarterly update on the Treasury Management position. It covers the first quarter of the year, so the first 6 months, and we bring this forward to comply with SITFA's Treasury Management Code and the approved Treasury Management Strategy that's approved every year in February. So the key highlights is in the borrowing position, the Council's borrowed £15.9 million this quarter, which brings the total debt from £253 million to £269 million. All that borrowing has been undertaken through the PWLB. On the investment position, our Treasury investments, we haven't actually got investments for yield, we've just got our cash flow investments whilst we hold cash for cash flow reasons. That stands at £16.1 million, that is up from £13.5 million at the beginning of the year. That is all invested in money market funds and short-term UK government deposits. We have fully complied with the Prudential Code and the SITFA Code and Treasury Management Strategy, and their details of individual potential indicators are set out within the report. The report also sets out the economic context which we've been operating in during the second quarter. So a lot of this is probably historic now with the budget and emerging information, but it really talks about things like inflation that remains stubbornly high. Bank rates, although have come down slightly, they haven't come down as fast as anticipated. Gilt yields are still quite high, and gilt yields, remember committees, what our lending rate is fixed to. It doesn't relate to base rate, it relates to gilt rates. That's why that's important for us to understand and follow. I think that's probably pretty much in the report. Perhaps to take any questions.
Okay, always a lot in the Treasury Management Report. Some parts of it sort of stay very similar from quarter to quarter, and other bits the figures change, but I'll open it to members. Are there any questions members want to ask, Vice Chair?
Just one question about the on page 17. There's a reference to the numbers. It says the numbers reflect the accrued position currently in the council's books, which does not take into account the collectability of income. Any kind of verbal update on indications thereof, any write-offs that might be necessary, or how likely the collectability is?
So the way the council accounts for its income is that as invoices are raised, we credit that invoice to the accounts on the assumption that income is coming in. And that what we then do is review our bad debt provision that will take some of that out at the year end. We haven't got any particular concerns that those significant levels of income will not come through. There's always some bad debts that come from time to time because of liquidations and like, but we haven't got any significant concerns around the collectability of the debt in the commercial asset portfolio.
I think I'm right in saying one of the KPIs that the Open Scrutiny Committee looks at once every so often is the percentage of both housing rents and council tax collected and commercial rents collected. And hopefully they'd be flagging up any sort of particular concerns in that area.
It also flags up there's voids in the portfolio as well, again, just to give that comfort from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Yeah, I had on the PWLB, Public Works Loan Board. Yeah. So that's the rates on that are linked to gilt yields, are they? And how is that? How does that work? Is it variable, or are they reset every so many months, or how does that work?
It's basically they're reset real time. So it's gilt rates plus 80 basis points. So it depends from day to day what that rate will be in line with what the market does. Unfortunately, it's good. It can be good and bad, obviously. Yeah.
Budget's been slightly good for you then. It's come down a bit. Yeah, the other question was about borrowing. So I noticed on table 1, you've got some figures there for borrowing. I think that's from March to March figures, isn't it, in table 1, I think. And it's forecast to go from 265 to 318, is that right? In table 1? Which is about 20%, if my maths are right. So I was just looking for a bit of a background about that increase, which seems reasonably significant over the period of a year. What's driving that forecast?
So that links to the capital strategy that we approve in our capital programme. Obviously, remember that includes the HRA borrowing and the general fund borrowing. So with that, what we do, we look at the capital programme when we think we're going to need to borrow for those capital projects, and that's what drives the level of borrowing forecast.
And the key capital projects behind that?
So the main capital...
Or is that, only if you've got the detail, don't know.
I haven't got it to hand, but it will be around... We've got ongoing investment in the Qualis development programme, and the HRA capital programme is also a big element of that. Also, we're finishing off, I won't point in the right direction, Epping Leisure Centre, and obviously the Northfield Airfield. So we've got quite a few quite chunky projects, and obviously the depot as well for the new TVS depots. We have got a lot of projects that are going on this year as well that support that.
Okay. And as well as the capital programme, we can see that one of the things that's driven the increase in borrowing this quarter is the Stringwood Grove Qualis development, which those who don't know is literally right next door to where we're sat now, which one of the first Qualis. I don't want to sort of go into the whys and wherefores, why it's taking so long, but what are the processes the council goes through to ensure that the right thing to do is to provide more development funding rather than say, well, crudely, this isn't going to end up in a good place and therefore it's not worth, putting more money after the project? So
with all development projects, so for Qualis, for example, we do the business plan that is approved every year, and that improves level of borrowing for individual projects. And there's drawdown facility to actually get those delivered. So what that ensures is we're borrowing for projects that are approved in the business plan, but nothing that isn't approved in the business plan and hasn't been approved through that Cabinet and Council process when we approve that business plan policy every year. That's the same if TVS was to invest as well, do the same thing.
Okay. And am I right in thinking that the next business plan is due fairly soon?
So the last business plan was January, so it will be on an annual basis, it will be early in the new year.
Okay, thanks for that. Do we know or sort of have an estimate of when the the balance will change, and because we're only funding existing projects now, as I understand, we're not funding new projects. Do we have any idea of when sort of the balance will change and when there'll be more money coming in than going out?
So we do a cash flow projection. So Springwood Grove should be coming to completion sort of the middle of next year. That's the main one. Then we've got Hemnall Street and St John's. There's a number of projects that should come to a conclusion first half of next year.
Okay, thanks. If I could just sort of follow up with one more. Some of these projects, I think, are development projects and some are land sales.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think I'm right in saying we've got a charge on the land when we gave the loan, so it was sort of, the loan was backed by an asset, as it were. If Qualis disposes of an asset that we've got a charge on, again, what's the process for, is that through the business plan, again, that's controlled?
Yeah, Qualis can't obviously dispose of anything unless it's for the business plan's been approved by the shareholder, i.e. the council.
No, that's helpful, thanks very much. Okay, anything else on the Treasury Management plan before we move? Oh, Councillor Morris.
Sorry, I was just going to ask another question on top of yours.
Yeah.
I mean, we're funding the development of these housing projects for Qualis. So if it had to be disposed of the entire asset, presumably we have a claim on that asset when they dispose of it. Again, so we can settle at least a portion of the loan that we've made on it. Well, hopefully all of it, but nicely some proportion of it.
So as part of the business plan, as part of the lending, there's a plan for when repayments of loans need to come back to the council. So there's a schedule attached to the loans. So it doesn't mean that if Qualis sold something immediately, it'll come back. It fits in with what the pre-agreed terms are.
Okay, so even if they dispose of an asset, the recovery to EFDC would be by the schedule that's been agreed for that. Yeah, okay, right, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. And I had one more question, which is, I thought it was table 1, but it wasn't. But there's a table in here which shows the amount of internal borrowing that we now have, mainly from the result of the land sale in North Weald. How's the sort of internal interest rate set on the internal borrowing? We've heard about how the interest rate set for external borrowing, but how do we set it for the internal borrowing?
There's not an interest rate as such that is set for internal borrowing. It all comes, in a nice way, it comes out in the wash with our capital financing. So what we do, our capital financing costs consist of our borrowing costs, minimum revenue provision, offset by our investment costs. So what internal borrowing basically does, it means we don't have the interest coming in because the cash isn't in the bank, but we're not borrowing, so the benefit is that differential between the borrowing and the lending. But it's accounted for as part of the Treasury strategy, looking at investments and borrowing, and we obviously do it to minimise borrowing costs.
Yeah. Actually, now you say that, remember you say something similar at the last meeting, and me asking a similar question at the last meeting, so thanks for that. Okay, well, if there's nothing else on the Treasury Management strategy, we'll move on to the internal audit report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual update report from internal audit and the corporate fraud team. 2 final reports have been issued since the last update. There was major incident management system given substantial assurance. The MIMS system was found to be robust and effectively mitigates the risks. There were no significant deficiencies found, and there were just some small opportunities for improvement, but these don't undermine the overall effectiveness of the systems. The second audit was the housing voids, which was also awarded substantial assurance. It was found that the voids are being effectively managed and the risks relating to the voids are well controlled. And I think it's worth pointing out that the recommendations arising from this audit have already been implemented. So moving on to the recommendation tracker, the detail is in Appendix 2. So we have 2 medium priority recommendations which are overdue, and we've got one high priority which is not past its due date yet. So this recommendation came out of the review of housing contractor, which is described in paragraph 6. Internal audit did a review around processes, found that a full tender exercise hadn't been undertaken. So this is around ensuring that we do have contracts in place for all our suppliers where we need to have one. The other piece of work that we've been doing is around the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, where a new failure to prevent fraud offence is being introduced, and we've developed an action plan which will be monitored by Corporate Governance Group to ensure that the changes required by the Act are implemented. I'm going to pass to Sarah now.
Continuing through the report then, the next bit is about the corporate fraud team, which I oversee. The corporate fraud team look at every single right to buy, vet it to make sure that it's legitimate, and does the anti-money laundering checks. So we want to make sure people who are purchasing their own home are using legitimate sources of funding. And back last year, the government removed the discount, and there was a great big flux of right to buy applications came in. The corporate fraud team of saying they can actually see the light at the end of the tunnel now because they've had a real lot to deal with. But it just shows you under item 8 and item 9 that it was really important that we do those checks on every single right to buy, because there are some anomalies that have been turned up. Also, they've been working with the housing 10 under item 10 with the housing team, and we've managed to recover a property, which means it's now back in circulation and can be used for our residents. The last part of the report talks about the annual governance statement action plan, and one of the areas that we needed to keep an eye on was local government reorganisation. So each council within Essex has now submitted their plan, and we're just waiting for the government to announce what the new unitaries look like. So there's been a lot of work in the background, and we continue to get ready for LGR, as it's known as. Second one is around the financial regulations. So the Section 151 officer, Owen, has been working with our monitoring officer and looking at the financial regulations as well as the procurement rules, and making sure that they are up to date and they're being fed through the systems of approval. Financial Management Code review is to make sure that we're in line with for good practice. High-level review looked at this and we determined that overall we were compliant, but we just actually need to go through and do that checklist and go through and cross all the T's and dots all the I's. And if anything significant comes out of that, then we will obviously put an action plan in place for that. Transparency Code, so under the Code 2015 code, there's certain information that we have to publish on our website, and we've been a bit amiss on that, so we've got a programme in place to make sure that that is all up to date by December. So some of the common themes that we just need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on is around performance indicators and making sure that we've got the right indicators in place. So that's been happening more at a service level. Making better use of artificial intelligence. So the council has now published its own AI policy on that, and that's been rolled out across the council, and there's various training and briefing being provided to staff members. And then there were some pockets of where we've got some very lean teams, and we just need to make sure that we have good emergency cover and succession planning. And that's sort of wrapped up within LGR, where we're just looking at our workforce at the moment and working out where all our people are. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. I always feel the internal audit update could easily be 3 separate reports. There's always so much there. But did anyone want to ask any questions about what we've just heard? Vice Chair.
Yeah, so thank you to the internal audit team. As Chair just highlighted, it's a chunky report with lots of good content. Couple of questions. I guess one is more of a comment on the AGS. I note that a couple of the items have been carried forward from prior periods. How do we make sure that we've got progress, that there's forward momentum on these items? As I note that there's no deadlines or dates attached to any of these.
So each time we do the AGS update, we go along to the relevant manager or director and try and pin them down to what they've done, what more they need to do. That then goes through to the corporate governance group. So we've got the 3 statutory officers on there, the head of paid service, the section 151, and the monitoring officer. And they will pick up if there's not enough action being taken on that before it comes to audit committee.
Would it be possible to ask for deadlines so that we avoid the carry forward as much as possible?
We'll make sure that's added for next time's update.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Morris?
Yeah, I just wanted, you mentioned there was a new policy on the use of artificial intelligence. Yeah, I just wanted to ask how that links to the work that you're doing on or is going on cyber security. Because AI is also a great benefit, it's also an area of risk. I just wondered how those two had been linked together.
So the biggest risk with AI at the moment is non-compliance with the general data protection regulations. So the message is very clear, is that don't put any personal or sensitive data within Copilot. It's Copilot that we've got at this council, and that's a very strong message that's being... so there is no explicit link at the moment with cyber security, but I know on the cyber security side that we've... they do phishing attacks, exercises on us, where they send us an email and they try and get us to click on a link, which is what AI would do as well. It was a really good one that they did. They were promising, click on this link and you get a free cup of Costa coffee. And unfortunately, there were some people that did go on it, which made them realise that they really needed to push the message home. We're very wary of it now, hopefully most staff are as well. So there's no explicit link at the moment, but it's that awareness of it's a good thing, but there are the dangers with it as well.
Okay, I was going to ask about the internal audit plan that's laid out on page 37. Obviously, last year we had to roll over some of the internal audits into this year for reasons which you explained at the time. And there's still quite a lot left to try and get done in the remaining part of this year. Just sort of explain how you're going to approach that and whether we're going to achieve all that.
Yeah, so ideally I want to achieve everything that's on there, and I've set out, I've got a matrix of what auditors are going to do, when they're going to do it, when we can expect to get it done. There may be some that we might want to defer for operational reasons or for good reasons that things have moved on, and we're going to bring that to the February committee meeting. I don't want to say what they are at the moment, but I have actually got all those audits planned in for the rest of the year. But unfortunately we get, well not unfortunately, we get investigations or additional bits of work like the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act that just throws us off course. So what we have to remember is that as head of internal audit, I need to give my opinion, overall opinion for the year on governance, risk management and internal controls. The majority of my assurances are from the work that internal audit does, but it's all this other stuff that we do in the background. So we're part of the risk management. When we go to SLT, we talk about risk with people, so we understand how risk works and things like that. So I am hopeful to deliver it, but I'll give you a better update in February. We're just taking stock, just coming up to Christmas.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks very much. And then perhaps if I could ask about on page 38, where we've got the recommendations. And we said at the last meeting how good it was to see the number of overdue recommendations reduce, and in fact have no overdue high priority recommendations. There's no harm in saying that again. But yes, once you've ticked off one thing, you then look at the next thing, don't you? And that first recommendation in particular has been hanging around since the end of, since 2022. And I just wondered, you look at the column and see the number of scratched out implementation dates, and I wondered how confident we were about achieving the end of year date down here.
We are reasonably comfortable. So we have a draft service schedule in place for finance, so obviously that just needs to be reviewed, and then that can then be approved. So I know the work is there. I'm not going to hand on heart because it's only a month away, but I think we're reasonably comfortable that will be delivered then or shortly after.
Okay, no, that's reassuring. Thanks very much. Yeah, and the other item I was going to mention is there's a couple of mentions of procurement in the report in terms of the work that's been done on the codes and policies and looking into the use of the procurement rules. And it did occur to me, well, not just me, it could other members as well, that it might be useful to have a sort of deeper look at some of the procurement issues, just to help the committee understand a bit more about how procurement works in the council and how it's approached. And perhaps we could invite the relevant member of staff to come along and share a bit about what they do and how they work. Are members happy to agree that request? Okay. Are you okay with that? Yeah. Okay.
We'll make that happen for you.
Thanks. Right. If there's nothing else on the internal audit report, yeah. Oh, right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Vice Chair.
Yeah, just following on from Chair's comment on Appendix 2 of the overdue and high priority. Just looking forward, obviously we talked about the overdues and the timelines and how things are kind of continuing on from 2022, etc. Looking at the new high recommendation or the finding that was raised, the timeline for that is very short. And I do want to point out, I think it's really admirable and very positive that the actions are broader than the finding that's been raised. I think that's very, very positive. But when you're trying to implement something that's wider than just the finding that's been raised, and I note that the action is reviewing housing contracts, that of course then makes it a bigger piece of work. So how likely do we think it is that that action will be completed by the end of the year?
So the Director of Housing, who'd not long been at the council when this review was carried out, was actually already aware of the issue, that there were not all contracts weren't in place, and had essentially started looking at that. So we're quite confident because they've actually have done some of them already. It was a case of identifying those which didn't have a contract in place, assigning the responsibility for making sure they exist, so I'm pretty confident.
Okay, well in that case, let's move on to the final item on page 40, which is all about risk management.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the quarterly update on the corporate risk register and the update. The risk register was reviewed by the senior leadership team and by the corporate governance group, and there are a number of key changes. So the homelessness demand risk has been increased from 12 to 16, and that's just reflecting the increase and growing demand of people presenting as homelessness in the borough. So that's something we will be we're keeping an eye on very carefully and working with some mitigations to try and support that. The Council's House Build programme, that has been removed and placed on the Service Risk Register. That was initially specifically around right to buy receipts and their use. These have now been spent, and the actual guidelines and legislation surrounding right to buy receipts has changed as well, giving us more time to actually spend them. So really that has been closed, a significant risk from a corporate perspective. The workforce and future profiling risk has been reduced from a 12 to an 8, and that reflects the ongoing work with the workforce strategy, linking to the LGR work we're doing. There's a training process in place. So again, there's a framework in place across the council to address those risks. So it still exists, but it's been reduced. Local government reorganisation, we've reduced that risk from a 20 to a 12. That reflects the fact that the business cases have now been sent in to MHCLG, who are reviewing them. We have a plan in place internally to manage our approach to LGR, and there was a plan across Essex, working with the other Essex boroughs, leaders, chief executives, about how we can manage the process. Obviously, we need to keep a careful eye on that because things will change as more information becomes available, but we have a strategy and a plan in place to address that work going forward, so we're more comfortable than we were previously. Conversely, and again we discussed this committee last quarter, the community cohesion risk, we've increased that from 16 to 20, just really to highlight the ongoing sort of national implications of, specifically for us, the Bell Hotel and the situation around that, which is continuing. We did talk about the community cohesion work that's going on across Essex. That is continuing, really looking at the initial problems and then working on a longer term strategy. That isn't in place yet, but that is in hand and working with all key partners really across Essex. The other risks on the report remain unchanged. Just wanted to point out that we did have a discussion last time around about cyber security. And just to point members that following that discussion, a note went as part of the the last committee to Cabinet on cybersecurity, setting out the approach the council is taking to that, and that links into some of the conversation we were having earlier with AI, and outlining whilst, although we are doing everything we can to manage it, the risk is continuing to evolve and to change, and again you can see that from sort of national media, so it's unlikely to reduce significantly from that score. So we can send out that link in the minutes perhaps also, so some members can review that at their leisure. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, no, that'd be very helpful if we have that in the minutes. Thanks very much. Yeah, last time when we talked about the risk register, the committee expressed some sort of surprise about how static a lot of the risks were. So whether coincidental or not, I think it's good to see, you know, some risks falling off the register, well, not falling off, being taken off the register, and, you know, others being adjusted. Members, any questions? Vice Chair.
You mentioned community cohesion there, and looking at the detail on page 47, with references to community cohesion cell being set up. It says engagement is under development, and you alluded to it, but could you expand a little bit more on what that looks like in practice on the ground?
So we have a regular... good point, thank you, yes. So there are regular meetings of all major stakeholders, so the police, health, councils, really looking at emerging issues, and then look at how we can involve the wider community, stakeholders, to try and address some of the underlying causes of sort of the fall in community cohesion, and then with view to having a wider strategy longer term, how we can address that going forward. But obviously that is definitely a longer term strategy that needs lots of different levers to try and to maximise the benefit. That's why it's trying to pull in all those key active players to try and influence that and feed into that.
Anyone else? Councillor Rice, yeah.
I just wanted to make one point on the coming back to cyber security. And I mean, in the news over the last couple of days, we had the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea and Westminster City Council who've been the targets for cyber attack. And there have been quotes from a number of experts on the website saying local authorities remain some of the easiest public sector targets for reasons that we well understand. So I just wanted to kind of emphasise my personal concerns about that risk and the fact that it appears to be remaining stably at 16.
I think again it will always be high. If you look at if Marks and Spencers can be hacked and Land Rover can be hacked, it's something that again, as a council, our own personal lives, we need to be very aware of. We're obviously doing training. We did training on Tuesday with staff around it. So it's something where we're doing all we can to try and mitigate.
And I think as long as it is read like that, you know, there will be questions asked at committees like this and other forums as well, and it will be at the front of people's minds, and that's one of the things, isn't it? Sort of eternal vigilance. Okay, I didn't have anything else on the risk register. We're asked to refer it to Cabinet for approval. Are people happy to refer it as it stands? Okay. Right. Well, that brings us, I think, to the end of the meeting. Let me just double check. Yeah, that brings us to the end of the meeting. So thanks very much for your questions and participation. And yes, look out for whether we've got a special meeting. Otherwise, we'll see you in February. Thanks very much.